I was vice president of the World Bank, and I wanted to fix that nonsense of African countries not getting the benefit of additional money. So the issue has been, how is it that one group of people used their assistance well, and another group of people mostly ended up with poor results? Germany was a heap of rubble at the end of the Second World War. And then there was a plan for aid, massive aid to Europe, not just to Germany. Europe was leveled. So there was development assistance to rebuild it. There was development assistance for South Korea, for Japan. It's happened across the world.
Hey there and welcome to Fanya Mambo Africa. I promise you we have an exciting show, a great one for that matter. And on this episode, we've crossed the borders. We just didn't go to, our neighbors here, down here, East Africa. No, we've gone further. And we have a guest from Nigeria. And because her CV is rich and huge, I had to write it down so I don't miss something. I have with me Dr. Oby. And before she takes onto the mic, she's the president of Human Capital Africa and senior economic advisor at the Africa Economic Development Policy Initiative. She has also served as the vice president of the World Bank's Africa region and has held ministerial positions in Nigeria overseeing minerals and later education. Of course, now she's the founder and chairperson of the School of Politics, Policy and Governance, which was established after the Fix Politics initiative. And she's also the convener of the Bring Back Our Girls campaign in Nigeria, if you remember that some years back. So I am not done with her CV, but if I go on, that will take pretty much of our time. So let me go straight to Dr. Oby.
Yeah.
Welcome to Kenya.
Thank you, Sarah.
Such an honor to have you.
I am excited to be in your space.
When you hear people introduce you with such huge, rich introduction, how does it make you feel?
I always say to them, just say, this is Oby Ezekwesili. Welcome her to the stage.
So yeah, welcome Dr. Oby. How did you pronounce?
Ezekwesili.
Ezekwesili to the stage of Alfa House.
Yes.
How are you finding Kenya so far?
Well, this is one of the countries on the continent I find myself coming to more frequently than a whole lot of the others. There are many things that bring me to Kenya. And Nairobi is a very important capital for that continent. There are many global things that happen here. There are continental things that happen here. And I'm deeply fond of the Kenyans. They remind me very much of the Nigerians.
Oh.
and I think
in a good way?
Yes, in a good way. A lot of your neighbors call you the Nigerians of East Africa because they think you're too candid. You're the ones who are always in a hurry to get something done compared to the rest. So we do share some striking similarities.
All right, at least it's on the good side.
No, yeah, I've always said that, Kenyans, and this was something that I would say in my days in the world of development. I always said that Kenyans are world-class people who, like my own people, unfortunately, have not been led by world-class leaders.
You've really started our conversation on high. What are they saying about us and our leadership out there at the moment?
I think that the positive side of it is what people are saying about the gregariousness, the relentlessness of your young Kenyans, the famous Gen Zs, and let's not forget the millennials. We're making it sometimes seem like millennials are now very old people. They really aren't.
Yeah.
They're the ones that we entered the millennium, really seeing them come to puberty and then growing into their 30s now. And what you have become, what the Kenyan young people have become is a symbol of the lack of interest of the younger demographic of our continent to maintain the status quo. That gives me enormous joy, because the status quo has not been in any way productive. It's not been in any way. I'm trying to find the right word to hit to strike this meaning. It's not been in any way visionary enough to translate the enormous possibilities of our continent to the optimal possibilities of development. And so when I see the relentlessness of the young Kenyans, the Gen Zs, the millennials, demanding for more, that for me is the expression of the new Africa we should have.
So that is the image that is out there about Kenya.
That is the image that is out there. I mean, what used to be out there about Kenya and Nigeria, famously in the wrong neighborhood when you do rankings of corruption, that used to be it. That used to be say, full and final stop, right?
Yeah.
Oh, they export coffee, they export tea, and then they have famously corrupt politicians. And then Nigeria, oh, great oil nation, and where's the money from the oil? It's a corrupt society. End of story. But today, there is much more to it. Mm-hmm. There's much more. It's also your young generation that has exemplified the power of technology for our continent, and the same thing with our own young people too. So the similarities are much, and I want to dwell so much more on the future. I want to talk so much more about the positives that will frame the future.
Okay.
And when I look at the kind of social networks that are leading to collective action, and the fact that what the young people are saying is, we're here. You can't act like we don't exist. That's so important. That's agency. And such agency is necessary in a democracy. When I hear some people say, the democracy has not worked in Africa, I say, can you stop? If you evaluated what we've practiced, it has not been democracy.
Okay, and when you look at these young people, for instance, in Kenya, what happened last year, where the whole Gen Z movement started, it's young people who got fed up with how the leadership was working. Mm. How do then the young people convert this? Because it was anger, mm-hmm. from anger mm-hmm. to moving now to points of leadership, mm-hmm. because we cannot then just sit and let the same people that angered us then move us to the next step.
I agree.
Yeah.
And so, but what I normally say is that anger is important because that triggers you into expression, right? Anger is an expression. If you sort of are getting a really bad deal, which is what a lot of Africans get from their political leaders, a lot of bad deal, where there's a huge disconnect between what could be produced through governance. Governance is the system through which, if you made the right sets of decisions on public issues, you would be able to have the kind of policies, the sound policies that would enable growth. If you made the right kinds of decisions for the interest of the public, you would have the right kinds of institutions anchored on the rule of law that give you the rules of the game so that people can get the signal as to how that society rewards and punishes. So it rewards effort, it punishes bad behavior. And that's the whole institutions argument. Then if you have the right sets of public decisions, you would have the art of selecting the right investments to put public money into in order to provide public goods, so basic services that would support businesses and your citizens to be productive, to have an environment that is not laborious or onerous or limiting. So because when you supply basic services of education, of roads, of access to water, of just basic services of health, if you had that, then you can assure people that they would operate in environments that the transaction costs are not high. They can not only be productive, but they can be competitive in being productive. So because we have not had that, it means that the Africans have gotten bad deals from governance. And so when the young ones say, we're tired of it, and they express it in the form of anger, everyone who is reasonable should understand that. Okay? And, you understand that because the data, it's not just that they are angry for nothing. Yeah. They are not angry for nothing. When you look at the data of Africa's performance, economically, socially, you can see clearly that there is no reason why Kenya should be where it is. There's no reason why Nigeria should be where it is. There's no reason why, most of the countries on the continent should be where they are, So that expression of anger was never there in most times, until the Gen Zs have picked up the gauntlet and they are saying, you know what? If our parents took it, we're not ready to take it. You've got to perform. You've got to show us. You're accountable to us. We want to see you do what you have been elected to do. That is number one for the continent. We should all be saying, bravo, bravo, bravo. Now, it means that we are not accepting of failure. Because an acceptance of failure is basically saying that failure is our destiny.
But your proposal is very good. However, we have not seen the young people received as that. And this is not just, let's say in Kenya, yes. We had a lot of police brutality. We've seen it in Mozambique. We saw it in Egypt, Nigeria.
We saw it everywhere.
Yeah, so why is it that then these leaders are not okay with these young people who are self-expressing and who actually are fighting for better countries and a better continent?
So if we connected the dots, why would a leader who has every reason not to fail, but failed, not be brutal in response to when you say you have failed? It's natural that they would not receive of the feedback they are getting. All right?
Yeah.
But I think that, to exhaust my thought on, this matter of they express the anger, but then where do we go from there? So I normally then say to the Gen Zs, your initial anger can be just an expression of anger. But then immediately you need to make it effective anger, which effective anger becomes the one that pushes you to saying, what's next? Well, let's define what we want in very coherent way and in ways that we all own that expectation that we are fighting for.
Yeah.
And then the next thing is, how do we sustain our engagement on this issue so that it is not a flash in the pan? So that becomes, what are the organizational systems through which we can maintain this level of technical engagement that's sophisticated, so that they don't say, don't you know, young people, they just like being angry. They just want to destroy things.
Yeah.
So just being able to have this strategic approach that builds on one phase, onto another phase, they become so powerful, you can't ignore them. And there's power in number. There's power in number. The fact that not just a few of them. In the past, you would say, civil society leaders should go and... No, that model is over. You don't need civil society leaders to be the ones fighting for the rest of them. They need to be fighting for themselves. And that's what they've done. So the next thing then becomes, because what they've done is to show that they are operating in what I call the office of the citizen. The office of the citizen is awake. The citizen suddenly realizes that just waiting for the office of the president, office of the minister, office of the governor, member of parliament, they are the suppliers of governance and they failed us. Therefore, on the demand side, we are awakening our office. We have awakened our office. And when you awaken that office, you have to have the tools of engagement.
Yeah.
So what I say to the Gen Zs is, don't quickly despair that your first set of engagement, you're wondering, okay, so what did we achieve? Or, where do we take this from? you okay. But now, in your reflection mode, in your evaluation mode, you have to say to yourself, there were things we didn't get right, and now we have to redesign our approach. So I had an interview yesterday where I simply said, they need to understand the concept of collegiate leadership that is transparent, because there is a lot of trust issues that stand in the way of the Gen Z's movements, because they're saying if a couple of people go out there and they say they are leaders, they are going to betray us. So we want everybody is a leader. Yes, I agree. That's why everybody owns their own office of the citizen. But in order for you to make the kind of progress that you need to make from one phase to another phase, you're going to need collegiate leadership that is transparent. You can design it. They are networked. These Gen Zs are networked.
Yeah.
So you can sort of say, let's design what a collegiate leadership that is transparent looks like. So the rest of us are still co-leading with this set of people who are transparently being mandated to engage. And that way, I say to them that you have to be evidence-based. You have to have empirical basis of engagement. If you leave it at the level of your anecdotes and your feelings and all of that, that's when you begin to misunderstand each other. Make it evidence-based. What are the things we're looking for? What is the data? I always say that, I have my mantra, which is that in God I trust, but every other person must bring data. So because so if we all agree the data, we already have a point of convergence, right? Yeah. And so those who go for us and that transparently, we have mechanisms for keeping them transparent, and it's not 2 or 3 people going for us. It's a representative, collegiate group of people that are tied to us. The decision-making process does not happen at their level.
Yeah.
It happens at our level. They can't go and say the youth have agreed. No, the youth haven't agreed until the youth have agreed.
So it has to begin with everyone involved at the base, and also people just understanding their role.
Precisely. Because division of labor.
Yeah.
Division of labor. You need this what I call the brain box. There has to be like a think tank amongst them. The ones who really can, take a public finance issue, for example, they understand it perfectly, and they are able to present what the alternative options could be. They're like policy. They're engaging on the matter of governance. So they have to be sophisticated in their arguments. All right. So you have to have your think tank immediately amongst you. You have to have the ones who have been, working on the issues of rural agriculture, or things that are related to the matters of the poor, the marginalized, the vulnerable. There are bodies of works that some of them that are out there on the street have done. So you have to recognize what everybody brings to the movement, and then you organize it in a way that you're very serious. If the Gen Zs got the strategy on this right, they are the government in waiting. Because they're simply saying, look at us, we have ideas of how things should go. But it cannot be ideas where you're making a statement that is totally out of sync with reality. You shouldn't be doing that, because immediately that discredits your basis for argument. That's why an evidence-based, well-organized kind of engagement. That's what people in office are normally afraid of.
That's so much wisdom, and I hope our Kenyan Gen Zs and millennials, you're taking notes on this, because this is what we need. Because I think the biggest challenge is also people just fighting each other when they show up in the limelight, which does not work for the good. And in line with that, in 2019, you ran for president in Nigeria.
Yes, I did.
What were your lessons and experiences? And if you were to do the same today, how different would it be, considering now the generation you're dealing with, even in Nigeria, is much younger?
Yes. So the first thing is, how did I end up running for office? I, who was known to be totally anti-politics. It was because I wasn't a Gen Z in 2019.
Of course.
I'm 62 years old, so I wasn't a Gen Z by any definition of it. But I have been one who, when I was what you could call a Gen Z, had stood up against the military in my country.
Oh.
Yes.
Did you want to run a coup?
No. I was calling out the military for poor governance and for corruption. It wasn't normal. In fact, they used to ask my mom whether I was suicidal. I was one of those that would, go against anything. And, so I was a Gen Z in my generation, as you would say.
Yeah.
Because I understood, I was quite young when I said to my dad, why are the countries on television better than mine? Why does my country not look as beautiful as the ones I see on television, And he said to me that it's a matter of how the countries are governed. And so I said, oh, wow, so why is our own country not governed in the way that we can be this beautiful? I was a precocious child that enjoyed conversations with my dad. So he said, well, we just don't have the kind of leaders to make our country as beautiful. And so I said, when I grow up, I will make sure that our country is beautiful. I was speaking as a child, but that thought followed me into adulthood. And so I was this restless being that wanted people to be accountable. That also was why, by the time I was in the professions, I became one of the co-founders of Transparency International globally.
Yeah.
So that part of me, very anxious for a society that works. You could say it started pretty early, and so I trained as a chartered accountant in Deloitte and Touche, one of the top global firms, and then I was in private sector, but I was a civic active, I would say, an active citizen in private sector, and then co-founded Transparency International. I was the only woman who chaired what was then known during the military era when they cancelled the election of 1993 in my country. That was the election in which I voted for the first time because we had military rule all through most of the time that we were growing. Okay, military rule before our civil war and military rule after our civil war. It wasn't until 1979 that we had a transition to democracy, and at that time I could not vote. It wasn't until and then by 1983 or thereabouts, that the second term of the administration in democracy was aborted by the military. And so back to military rule. So the first time I then got a chance to vote ever in my life, as one born in 1963, it was in 1999 that I voted for in 1993 that I voted for the first time in my life. And I voted in 1993 for the first time in my life, and then you cancelled the election because the military was not ready to go. Oh boy, I was a professional already, and there were other professionals who felt as bad as I felt. And so there was an organization formed known as Concerned Professionals, and I was one of the leaders of that organization, eventually became the chair of that organization. So in this story of my life, you can see a restlessness about governance.
Yes.
And so I, many times, years after, I engage on this matter, and then I end up in government. And then I carried my championship of good governance into government, and in the various roles that I had in government, it was about good governance. Looked at it from that perspective, and I was part of President Obasanjo's economic team that was known as the Dream Team because of the kind of reforms that were globally respected reforms. So we then leave government. I left government earlier than the administration ended. Before the administration ended, I was globally recruited, and I became vice president of the World Bank, responsible for Africa region. I engage with African countries, and I see the similarity between what was going on in my country that we had to deal with and what the rest of the continent was going through. Now, in all of that, the kind of difference it made for us to have been in government, there were a collection of us in that administration that pushed the limits of what could be done. And then I come back years after, and the politics has unraveled most of the progress that was made. And the next thing, girls were abducted.
Yeah.
And the government could not be bothered, didn't show what we know social contract requires of government. It was like, these girls are children of the poor, so if the children of elites like myself had vanished suddenly from their school, the whole country would be, the government would do everything.
Yeah.
But it was like, couldn't be bothered. And I said, no, I'm sorry, I don't accept this. This is exactly what this lack of empathy in governance is about, and I'm going to resist it. So I together with other women and men, embodied a campaign saying these girls deserved the justice of rescue by the Nigerian state. And I then give my time to it because the government decides to be adversarial about our asking for accountability. That government loses election. Another government comes on the wing, on the promise that it was going to get
Bring
those girls back.
girls.
Repeats the same behavior as the government it's sent out of office. Does not think that it needed to be accountable for these girls. In governance, once you enter into office, you've inherited the assets and the liabilities of governance. So we hold on to firmly to the fact that they must give justice to the girls. Campaigned for an additional almost 6 years until COVID. By the time of 2018, when I saw the despicable behavior of that particular administration toward the girls, it just dawned on me that, wait a minute, our politicians are simply acting in the same way. And that perhaps what's going on is that we have given too much latitude to these sets of people to think that they have an imperial right to lord it over the country. And so I said, I have to do something. It's either I just ignore Nigeria and not bother myself, or I continue to hold people who did not care to be held accountable to accountability. We've done it for years. Nothing substantial had happened. Or I would have to do something different, which my husband said, baby, I know you hate politics, but perhaps this is time for you to signal that politics is actually something that people like you in this country, on this continent, should participate in. Because the quality of the people doing the politics does not match to the expectations that we have for our continent. And so I decided to run for office. That's how I ran for office of president, and on the ticket of a small party that said that they believed in my values. Turns out they didn't believe in my values. They thought that I was going to be a meal coupon because having worked for the World Bank as vice president, I must have many angles to bring in money that the party and the officials could, enjoy. And I say to them, guys, no, I'm running a different kind of campaign. I'm running a campaign where the citizens will understand their power and want to embody this campaign, it didn't work out well because they were determined on the money cost, wanted me to just, all of your contacts around the world, they would give us money. And I'm like, excuse me, guys, what does the Electoral Act say about campaign financing? Stop this nonsense. They wouldn't be persuaded. After realizing that I was wasting my time with a bunch of people whose values were totally at variance with mine, I decided that I would rather not run for this office than compromise with these fellows. So it was a fundamental clash in values. And so I faced the country and painfully said I was stepping down from running. And I was already a candidate. I was on the ballot 3 weeks to the election. I did that. But I was on the one hand, I was so grossly embarrassed and disappointed at how things turned out. But on the other hand, I was very, very pleased because I felt if my dad were here, he would have been so proud of me that I defended my values, because he had raised me on the note, he had raised me and my siblings on the note that nothing is worth negotiating your values for.
Very, very few people would do that on the political space.
Oh, no, sorry, no, I don't fall into the average. So I made that decision, and then I said, my goodness, someone like me now made a decision to go into politics, and this is what happens. There's something about politics in Africa that needs to be studied so that we can understand it. Otherwise, I've done advocacy for good governance. I decided to enter into politics. This is the way it's ended. What's the future like? At this point, I was no longer in career. I'd done it. I'd been minister at a very young age, gone to the World Bank at a very young age, left the World Bank at a reasonably young age of 49. And so I wasn't interested in jobs. I wasn't interested in doing any jobs. So this issue of saying we need to structurally transform our society had now become my cause celeb, right? So I went away to Berlin, Germany as a Richard von Weizsäcker fellow to do this research on how does this politics correlate or cause the situation we have with Africa's poor performance. And so that's what's known as fixed politics research. So that research looked at the nexus between Africa's quality of politics and its economic performance. So it was from that we now propounded this theory of change, where we say that if you're going to structurally transform Africa's politics, you have to carry out initiatives that would raise the political influence of the electorate, and then you would have to build the electorate being the demand side of politics, and that you would have to change the political culture of the politicians, that is the supply side of politics, and then you would have to reform the regulatory context in which the electorate and the politicians meet. So that is what we know as the triangular pillars of democracy. And on that supply side of the politicians and changing the political culture, our solution is different levels of leadership development. And so the core one for us is the schools of politics, policy, and governance that are unconventional schools that you could call public leadership development systems.
Okay. just let me ask you, because I need to refer so I don't make a mistake of the name. It's
SPPG.
SPPG. Yes.
SPPG.
So SPPG is across, of course, Africa. You're currently in 3 countries, right?
Yes.
There's Nigeria, Senegal, and Kenya now.
Yeah.
And it would be important just to understand what would be the expectations of the people that go through this SPPG? And since, of course, you've been running in Nigeria, what has been the impact?
Yes.
And what do we expect from Kenya?
Yes. So we following the research, we were able to form a community of people who are like me from across the country and from across different professional endeavors. So it's representative of our society, but it's what the group that you could call the coalition of the willing, those who are interested in transforming their political system in order to get economic progress, right? So we then designed the school and started the first cohort in 2020. By 2021, we graduated what we know as a pioneer class. By 2021, 2022, we had graduated about 200 plus people. 2023, before our third cohort graduated in October, then our elections, our general and presidential elections, happened in February, March. Guess what? 55 of our graduates ran for office for the first time ever in their lives. These are people who are mid-level career people from professions like law, accountancy, banking, development, civil society, because we really go for the top of the cream of society. Like when you look at the Kenyan millennials, or even the Gen X's in their 40s, and as the case may be, you look at some of the Gen Z's, they are really accomplished already in terms of having track record of what they have been able to achieve with their lives. And now you're trying to get them to say, why are you all sitting around and allowing those that do not have the mastery and do not have the ethics of public leadership to run roughshod over you? You should be replacing the generation of politicians, the cadre of politicians that are failing you. You can't simply hope that something will change. Nothing is going to change. That's what my research showed, that there is a dominant political culture on our continent that subordinates, that causes the extant, that is the existing political class, to act in ways that are ruinous to their society and the public interest. Why? Because they act in ways that put their personal gain and interest over that of the collective. Okay? So if you're going to change that kind of a dominant culture, you have to find a counterculture. That counterculture can only happen if you massively educate a new set of people who would have the character, that is the ethics, the ethical culture, and they would have the competence of how to, they can follow issues of governance across the sectors that are necessary to be understood so that you can make the right public decisions around those issues. And they have to be capable people. You have equipped them with the tools of being able to solve complex problems of public interest. So we have our reason for training people as being that we want to have a massive number of Kenyans or Nigerians in politics that have character, competence, and capacity, and that our customized curriculum that is anchored on the unique issues that governments, whether you're in government as a president, a vice president, a member of parliament, a governor, the things that you need to know, the person that you need to be in order to make most of the times the right decisions concerning your country. So those are the people we're training. We're training a new political class
And
for a
that is
continent.
needed in Kenya for sure.
We're training a new political class.
Yeah.
And some people, when we talk of it this way, they think, oh, you're just being romantic. That is not possible. Well, we're doing it. How can you imagine that? That we 55 out of the first 2 cohorts picked up. These are professionals that had never thought of running for office. But somewhere in that society, they were sitting there and saying, how can I do this?
Yeah.
How could I do this? What path should I follow? And suddenly, they saw that there is a path. So what do you think they did? They came for it. So we're in our 5th cohort, but there are 4 cohorts. We already have 754 graduates.
Congratulations on that.
I'm telling you, from our school. And then our first country outside of Nigeria, Senegal, started a year and a half ago. And we did the graduation of the first cohort was it? I think it must have been in February or March, And so Kenya is starting anytime soon. I think what we have now is that the applications, the admission process has begun. Mm-hmm. If I am a Gen X, if I am a millennial, if I am a Gen Z who is done some really important things with my life, and I know that somewhere in my blood there is a desire to serve the public and serve the public ethically and with competence and capacity. I shouldn't just listen to a talk about SPPG Kenya and walk away. I should act. I should act.
And for them to act, where do they apply? Is there like a website?
There is. There is a sppgkenya.org. As a website, but they can even find it by just going to the SPPG handle on Twitter, or Instagram. They can find it on
TikTok.
On TikTok, I'm not sure about TikTok yet. I think they're on Twitter. They are on Facebook. They are on Instagram. They are on LinkedIn. So you can find it there. And frankly, when you think of the Kenyans who are designing this process, because what we do essentially is to say, hey guys, this is a model that we have. If you really care to achieve the same thing of changing, because we want to change our political class. It cannot be just a few people. It has to be you train massively. If Kenyans, like our own vision for our country, get to the point where you have had like 10,000 people over the next decade or 2, be people that have been trained to be a different genre of public leaders. The benefit.
We just need 300, and then we can have them in Parliament in 2027.
Yeah, but you have to keep replenishing.
I'm saying between now and the next election, we just need 300. So Kenyans, if you heard that, don't miss out. Go to SPPG and SPPG Kenya.
If you go to thesppg.org, it will take you to the Kenyan page.
Fantastic. Kenyans, don't miss out the opportunity. Yes. Fantastic space, and I am going to be among the leaders on that,
amazing.
On that training.
I'm so excited, Sarah,
so I'm already excited about it.
Yes, you personify what we're looking for. We're looking for societies that are inclusive. So, the SPPG Kenya community, that is the Fixed Politics Kenya community, it is chaired by Ambassador Erastus Nwenche, so it has people like Dr. Njoki, now I lost my memory in terms of the last name, but you have people like Nerima, your friend.
Nerima Wako.
Yes.
Fantastic.
So you have really impressive. There's Winnie. There's Bina. When I look at those young women, I look at Diane. They are just amazing. They are totally committed to, and that they are the ones carrying it. So we don't sort of come as Nigeria and we're trying to do. No. It's basically let's look at this model. Let's replicate it That's what we did in Senegal. The Senegals are running their school. The Kenyans will run their school. And usually, the beauty of the SPPG program is the quality of the faculty that we normally line up. The Nigerian faculty is 94 people. It is made up of academics, experts, and practitioners of the highest quality. So we have academics that teach from the top schools in Nigeria, in Africa, and the rest of the world. So in the rest of the world, for example, we have academics who are teaching from out of Yale, out of Harvard, out of Sussex, out of LSE, out of the Haiti School of Governance in Berlin, Germany, and such like, right? In practitioners, take a typical course in the Nigerian curriculum, which also would be in the Kenyan curriculum, public financial management. Guess who teaches it in the SPPG? It is the man who was a governor of the Central Bank of Guinea, Conakry. Then he became Minister of Finance. Then he was also Minister of Minerals. Then he's an academic also, but a practitioner academic. Then he became the ambassador of Guinea to Washington, to America, to the US. He is a faculty.
Wow.
You have practitioners like a Rosa Whitaker who teaches global trade. She was the assistant trade representative of the United States for Africa.
So it's very experiential.
It's experiential. It is theoretical because we need leaders who can follow theoretical frameworks. Yeah. It's very important. And then you have this experiential dose that is huge on it. And then, someone like me, I'm on the faculty. I teach in Nigeria, I teach in Senegal, some of the key aspects that really border on those issues of how, one of the courses I teach is evidence-based policy making for results. When I teach that class, I teach it from a theoretical as well as a practical, because I have been the theory, in my training as an economic policy expert, I have all of that theory, but then I have been in government as a minister. And I have done reform beyond, aside from being a minister. I have been part of a presidential economic team, delivering on some specific reforms, like I reformed the country's public procurement system. On the basis of that, the country knows me as Madam Due Process,
I love that.
Sanitizing the public procurement system. Yeah. So when I'm teaching in class, it's a different kind of engagement of the teaching process. So in Senegal, their faculty is about, I think theirs is even 96. And a lot of their faculty are French speakers who are academics, who are practitioners, who are experts. When people have looked at our programs across these two countries so far, what they say is the faculty that SPPG offers people is way above the average faculty of universities in Africa.
Wow.
Yes.
That's huge.
Yes.
And now that you've touched about the faculty members and women leadership, I would want to look at it on the continental level. At the moment, we just have 2 female presidents, one in
elected
Tanzania.
Female presidents, yes.
One is not even elected. It was just the former president of Tanzania passed on. And
didn't she eventually win an election?
The election is coming up.
Oh, it's still coming up.
Yes,
that's true.
Yes. So we have President Samia Suluhu, and we have the president of Namibia. Nandia, something. I forget the second name. When you look at that level in a country of 55...
In a continent
of 54, yes. Yeah. When you look at that and the way women have struggled to get to the top, what is this SPPG bringing to maybe have more women at the top?
So we are a 50-50 equality school. Basically, what that means is that we are deliberate in making sure that as many women as men are coming into our school. And so in the case of Nigeria, the first year, we didn't achieve anything close to that. We had only about 27% of women and dominant male participation. And then by the second cohort, we inched up a little to 34% because we were deliberate. We were looking in the networks where women operate. With the SPPG, you can't just put out an advert and hope that people would see it and then apply. No, we would actually target who we want to come into the school. So we send the information on SPPG to professional bodies. We send to women, groups like the Women in Business, WIMBIZ in Nigeria. It's an influential. It really brings together women entrepreneurs and at a very high professional level. Women's Society of Accountants, for example, or the Women Association within the Nigerian Bar Association. So you target it that way with that kind of a deliberate outreach. What then happens is that more women are aware. What usually happens is that something can be done by both a male and a female, but the information doesn't get to the female. So that often is why you don't find women in some spaces. Just the lack of, what we call is asymmetry of information. Men have more information superior to what women have. So we've broken that down. We've broken that, and women have equal information on our programs. So by the fourth cohort, we now had 45% women. And then by this fifth cohort, guess what happened?
It's a switch.
We have 51.4%.
Wow.
It's unbelievable. You can make it happen.
Yeah.
And politics is not something that women want to do. Because like when I was running, I think it then brought some measure of, because what is said is that even though we have had other female presidential candidates, when I ran, it was a signal. It was a major signal in the country. And we had, comments that went in the direction of saying, this is the first time that a really, top female presidential candidate has appeared on the political scene of Nigeria. That was important for many women who are professionals to feel, I can do this. I also, it's a safe space. If Oby Ezekwesili put herself out to do this, I also can do that, which is why I fight for the right of women who are in public leadership. I also have the honor of being the chair of Women Political Leaders globally. This is the flagship organization in the world that women who are presidents or who were presidents or who are prime ministers or were prime ministers, women who are parliamentarians or were parliamentarians, women who served in cabinets around the world, they all belong to the Women Political Leaders. And it's based out of Brussels. We are the ones that, together with the government of Iceland, established what is known as the Reykjavik Forum in Iceland. It holds a big summit of top-level women every year.
Wow.
In November in Reykjavik, which is the capital of Iceland. And so it is my duty as chair of the board of these women political leaders to look out for the issues of women in public leadership.
That's great.
And so it matters to me very much.
It matters.
That we can get more women into Africa's politics. Because, by the way, one of the interesting data, I talked about data, that we've seen is how when women participate in public leadership, we have seen almost a, a marginal improvement in the scores of the countries on governance
And this,
and transparency.
I wanted to ask the question, but you've brought it up already. I was going to ask. When you look at the African continent, I think we've had, one of the most famous was Ellen
Sirleaf Johnson.
Yes.
Yeah, Johnson Sirleaf.
Yes. When you look, if we were to have more female presidents across the different countries,
Right.
would the continent be different? If yes, why? If no, then why not?
I don't know, but there is, because we have to stay with data, right? So if what we see, even through Mo Ibrahim's Ibrahim Foundation's rankings on governance, if we've seen that the countries that have higher percentage of women in public leadership do better on the governance ranking, it's telling us something. And then those who have picked that data and said, let's understand it a little bit more, have said that there is a tendency for women in office to operate at a higher standard of values because it is much more shameful for a woman to be caught in corruption than for a man to be caught in corruption. So there is this moral expectation of women that also drives them in terms of the way that they are acting in public office. And then the second part of it is that women tend to be nurturers. So the issues of governance often border on how can we make life better for our children? How can we make life better for our young people? Women are carried that motherhood sense into the way they are making public decisions. So they have a tendency to want to find options that are better for more people than to say it's all about myself. So there's less egotistical basis for decision making. So maybe that's part of what we're saying. Because after all, you know that during COVID, the countries that had the least morbidity from COVID, fatality from COVID, were countries that were being led by women. It was incredible. It was incredible. And so there was this whole research as to how did this happen. So what they found commonly across these countries was that when that outbreak happened, when that COVID outbreak happened in the world, that the women were so shaken as leaders. They were frightened by the thought that under their leadership, they would see their citizens dying. So they were much more open to ideas. The men acted differently. They just sort of wanted to be masculine about it. So they were not saying that, hey, we need to find. So they were less transparent and they were less accommodating of ideas that could. So you found that more men denied COVID than the women that were in office. So whether it was the woman in the then president of the then prime minister of New Zealand, or that's president of Thailand, or that of Chancellor Merkel of Germany. There were quite a collection of them at that time. There were at least about 7 presidents that were running, or prime ministers that were running countries that had the least fatality in as a result of COVID-19, pandemic. So there is something that more research has to unearth about this idea of female leadership, leadership expressed by women. But for me, I would say that if men have governed our countries most of the time, and this is the result they have produced, then if we're rational enough, we should say there are two genders. One gender has produced this kind of. So why don't we test and see whether the other gender
Can do better.
can do better?
That would be interesting for my home country, that is Kenya, of course. And
what I love is that there are men who are actually today are thinking that way.
Yeah,
they are
sure,
saying things like, maybe our women will rescue us from this situation.
maybe that's a maybe, and maybe Kenyans, we should give it a try. I mean, let's just wait for 2027 and see. Something else I would want to understand: you've worked across different nations.
Yes.
In the continent, what's the place of diplomacy in politics, and how critical is it for a nation?
Oh, diplomacy is so important in politics, but one of the saddest things that we've seen with diplomacy, interestingly, I have this very diverse range of academic interests. I do have a master's in international law and diplomacy. My mom used to say she studied diplomacy, but she's not diplomatic.
It was for the books.
I am very candid. I'm known for my candor.
No diplomacy language.
Like I say to people, call a spade, not an agricultural implement. And that takes me to that question you asked, which is that, today's diplomacy cannot be based on deceit, because we are in a global world where there's so much more information available to all. So when you're trying to do diplomacy of deceit, people can call you out.
Yeah.
So what is important in diplomacy today is for whether you're the topmost leader or a middle-ranking leader, as long as you are a voice for your society, you have to have the facts, and you need to use the facts to make sound arguments, and you also have to be respectful of the other side, even when you disagree. And that is a thing that requires sophistication. And that is part of why attending the SPPG is really a no-brainer.
Yeah.
You just have to attend the SPPG if you're going to, because these are the things that, one of our courses has to do with, two of our courses really have to do with this whole culture of diplomacy and the skills of communication and poise and etiquette. So these are things. These are things that are so important. For example, I am normally shocked that because people have not been prepared for public office, you can go to a dinner of presidents and prime ministers and ministers, top public officials of a country, and I have been in those, I'm frequently in those, even up until today in my life, and you see people who are scooping their food with spoon. How do you use it? You can scoop your rice with spoon. It's totally, you can take liberty and do that when you're sitting in your home.
Yeah.
Because some people say, I like it with my spoon because I throw it in. And it's better. Some of it will not fall off the spoon,
Yeah.
but with fork, it could fall off. But there's an etiquette of eating.
Yes.
In the public. So those kinds of basic things, just operating at a level of sophistication that is ennobling of your society. Because leadership comes with nobility also. And all of these things, these niceties, you can say, oh, that is not, it is part of it. It is part of it. Just being able to know how that you can disagree but not be disagreeable. You can object but not be objectionable. Those kinds of things are the ethos of diplomacy.
Very critical, I see. When you look at the world we are in today, we have a Trump presidency in the United States, and his presidency has actually shaken the whole world.
Yes.
As I mean, the world over. Very particular for Africa. When he got in, some of the first orders were to withdraw the global funding,
Yes.
the aid that was coming. With that sort of governance that he's taking for his country, what does that mean for Africa? And then does it mean now Africa has to shift how we operate, or do we now submit and just swing the way he wants leaders to swing?
There is absolutely no reason why our continent should swim the way any other part of the world wants us to swim. I love this quote from Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, the founding leader of Ghana, and the frontline leader of our continent. Pan-Africanism came from him and a couple of them, including your founding leader,
Jomo Kenyatta.
Jomo Kenyatta. He said, Africa does not have to look to the east nor to the west. Africa needs to look to the future. It needs to look forward.
Yeah.
Do you get that?
Yes.
So we should by all means be friends with everybody, but we have our own agency. We cannot continue to cower at and just be a humanitarian case for the world. We need, which is why this matter of fixing our governance and this matter of a design approach that is making us be the ones. The SPPG, the fixed politics, is not something that some foreigner has taught for us and has asked us to come and implement. No, it is us as Africans saying, hey, we now see the greatest obstacle to our development. It is poor governance, and you can't get to governance without politics. So we have to fix our politics so that we can get good governance, so that we can have the right policies, the right institutions, the right investments, and we will begin to grow. That is the simple definition of this theory of change that we're implementing. So on the basis of that, therefore, we as Africans, we see the changing global reality. The funding architecture for development is markedly changed because, as you know, the U.S. is a military power, economic power, diplomacy power. So in every sense of the word, the leader of the world. And so the same U.S. that benefited very much from global cooperation has decided that global cooperation and global trade will no longer serve its purpose because of a new president in President Trump. And when that happens, we just go back to our drawing table. And I think that the greatest thing for me is when I have seen the younger generation of Africans say, hey, wait a minute, how much of impact has development assistance really had? When they ask that question, I say to them, you're asking a question of how has governance failed us? Because other countries that got development assistance and still get India, China, they deployed development assistance differently because they had effective governance systems. So we failed to put effective governance systems. We failed to have the kind of quality of political leaders that were making decisions for our own benefit. And so when we cry and say, oh, these people are doing this to us, no, our crying should start first from home, right? Because you have to tell yourself the truth. If you don't own a problem, you cannot solve it. So taking ownership of the problem means that we're going to sit at the table right now and say, okay, some things have changed around the world. How are we going to adjust ourselves? So you know that first thing you have to do is to say our domestic resources. How do we ensure that we're getting more for the buck? You know, so public expenditure management to ensure that you're squeezing value. So those who who enjoyed all kinds of fancy things in the name of we're the big men that are ruling you right now. And, because I am the president, I am entitled to a good life. I need a befitting palace. Is that a priority for the country? You have to be asking those questions. Every Kenyan shilling has to be accounted for in terms of the value that it will bring, the impact for the larger number. So those kinds of things begin to change the way that we're engaging ourselves in the reality that is different. We have to say, how do we, create more? How do we create more? Look at Kenya. Look at the innovation that M-Pesa brought. I was VP at the bank, and when M-Pesa happened, it was an innovation, global innovation, because mobile money hadn't become a thing. And here it was happening in Kenya. I was like, come on, this is Africa's innovation, And what happened was, I think it's, the gentleman from Safaricom. I am trying to remember. Joseph.
Michael Joseph.
Yes, Michael Joseph. I actually brought him to the bank as our innovation fellow for the Africa region. Mm-hmm. And guess what? We contributed him to South Asia region and to Southeast Asia region to go and talk to them about mobile money. That was innovation out of Kenya. Think of the kind of creativity and innovative mindset of your young people. Technology, I normally say that there are three things, compelling things that will push Africa into its development in the 21st century. I say it is women, young people, and technology. Kenya has got all three.
Yes, we
Can you imagine having governments that are effective? They will understand this. So they will enable these three things to really collectively push in that direction. So when I look at Africa, I just know that if we fixed governance, the world would have to know that we failed only because we did not act quickly.
So, in your opinion, I know there's a book that talks about debt aid. Mm. Has the aid that has come to us since independence been worth?
That's all I just said, which is that, others used aid. Aid is not a bad thing in the sense of what we saw with the Marshall Plan. Germany was a heap of rubble at the end of the Second World War. And then there was a plan for aid, massive aid to Europe, not just to Germany. Europe was leveled. So there was development assistance to rebuild it. There was development assistance for South Korea, for Japan. It's happened across the world. The issue, it's China. By the time it embraced the world and came out of its, iron cotton, India, when it came out of autarky, they have been beneficiaries of aid. So the issue has been, how is it that one group of people used their assistance well, and another group of people mostly ended up with poor results? It was always at the center of the way that I engaged the countries of the continent when I was on that side of development assistance. Because I was vice president of the World Bank. And I wanted to fix that nonsense of African countries not getting the benefit of additional money and the knowledge that our own development assistance from the bank brings is even more important. In fact, China valued the knowledge so much. When I was VP at the World Bank, I'd go as a guest of the Chinese government, and they would be thanking me for the support that the bank gave them all through the years. I'm telling you, because Mark Namara was the bank president that met with Deng Xiaoping, who was the former president of of China in the 70s. And he said to him, we're poor, but we believe that we will be like the rest of the world eventually. We can try to do it ourselves, but if the World Bank would help us, we'll do it faster. It's a quote.
Quite sad.
It's a quote. And you know what McNamara did? There was the first decentralization of bank staff to any country. He took the best of the bank experts in the different fields. In fact, one of the things that they would take me to are the agriculture sector of China in my time at the bank, and they would show me the bank programs of that era. And you know that agricultural reform was the beginning of China's revolution, because initially agriculture was based on communism, where we all will own a little piece of land, and whatever we all grow, we will all, be given little pieces of the outcomes, because the state will take everything we grow, and then, so the reform of the agriculture sector, where property rights were now recognized and people were freed. So they brought market principles into the agriculture sector. So you get your land and you decide how much work you want to do. Because in Africa, we say that the goat that everybody owns is the one you see after midnight roaming the street. There's no incentive for any individual to want to take care of this goat that is owned collectively.
Yeah.
So once they understood the power of the markets, where you give people their freedom, their economic freedom to put their best effort, people just really say, while the other families are sleeping, my family and I, we will work all night, because after all, we'll keep all the benefits to ourselves. So that freed China. And that was how, through the agricultural revolution, they then became a country that understood market incentives. They went from that to next level of sophistication to the China we see today.
Wow.
That has lifted more than 800 million people out of poverty.
Yeah.
So it can be done.
If
there's anything for us as a continent, it is that it can be done. It can even be done faster, because China and India got their growth. When people say, how do you tackle poverty? It is by growing. If your economy is not growing and growing in the right kind of way, you can never tackle poverty.
Yeah,
Growth
true.
is what lifts people out of poverty. So they grew in the right kinds of ways because they took hold of knowledge to be able to design the right kinds of policies across sectors of their economies, and understood the concept of comparative advantage and the expertise that was necessary to, so the quality of the people in their governments mattered. You don't go and say, I like my cousin, he's going to do so and so for Kenya. What's your cousin's business with governance in Kenya?
Nothing at all. Zero.
He doesn't bring anything to, in expertise. He doesn't bring anything in terms of the ethics. The fact that you're even thinking of your cousin as the only person who has an idea to solve the problem in Kenya is a problem already.
Yeah.
Because the conflict of interest that's involved in that and all of that. So because of the way that they accessed and used development assistance, they have better outcomes than we have had. Think of a place like DRC. It got a lot in terms of development assistance in the time of, say, Mobutu Sese Seko. Most of it was ferreted into private accounts. It's the story of development assistance on our continent.
Sad story.
Is that not a sad story? It is a sad story. And that for me, is what the mindset that has to shift, which is why when the Gen Zs are saying to presidents in their countries, you have no business enjoying the resources of the state and making hopeless decisions that are not favorable to the population just because you're president.
Yeah.
That is a pathway to our freedom.
And we love it. Every time, especially our Kenyan politicians speak to us, and we've read in history, we've always been told that during independence, Kenya and Singapore were on the same level
Same
in terms of
with
GDP.
I agree. Yeah.
Today-
the data is there. The data is there.
We only dream of a Kenyan Singapore. And
No,
we've been
you're-
promised oftentimes. I'm not sure if we are getting
Your
there.
GDP per capita is a little less than $2,000. It's about $1,842 GDP per capita, meaning if you took your gross domestic product, that is the goods, the services, everything that can be attributed to Kenyan action, Kenyan effort,
Yeah.
and divided it amongst your population, each person will be entitled to would have $1,842 or thereabouts as their piece. Singapore, similar to Nigeria, Kenya similar to Nigeria.
Yeah.
Singapore started at about those levels of $300 something in the 60s. Today, Singapore is at $81,000 income per capita. That is about how many? Probably. It's about 42 times or thereabouts of the Kenyan GDP.
Yeah.
Nigeria has become worse now. Our GDP got to as far as $3,000+. Poor economic policies over the last, say, 10, 12, 13 years has thrown us down to GDP per capita less than what we had in the 90s. We're now below 1,000 income per capita. Do you get it? So the recklessness of leadership is not something that we should tolerate. It is not something that we should enable. Otherwise, we are accomplices. Citizens have been accomplices to their own detriment.
That is very true. And when you look at Africa, some of the people that have gotten tired with that have decided we can't continue with this. And unfortunately, or fortunately for them, they've decided we will take over power through a coup. And that has happened in Niger, Mali,
Yes.
Burkina Faso. And currently, actually, Burkina Faso is everyone's eyes are on that country, and there's a lot of positive things coming. I mean, I know democracy is the right way.
Yes.
But if a democracy does not work, and maybe what Ibrahim Traore is doing is working, then is it something that the young people should consider across?
So because I am a long-term thinker, I always am not quick at saying, hey, this is a great, thing. The reason being that we also have to remember what the past can predict about the future.
Yeah.
We know that the past in West Africa, we saw many early signs when we had the culture of military coups. It used to be the habitual. You had less of that in East Africa.
Yeah.
But in West Africa, coups were the order of the day in the years that I was growing. And sometimes you saw a coupist leader who would, in the early moments, they would do things that are populist, and everybody would say, yeah, the Messiah is here. And then you look over the long term and you say, oh dear, what is this?
Wrong turn.
And then another group will do a coup and send that one home. And then that one would say, I have come to correct all the things that are, and then you say, oh, okay, maybe we have somebody who is really going to do. So because of that, I am less, quick at saying, hey, here comes a savior. So it is important to acknowledge that what we have experienced in West Africa all through if you looked since independence, has been that militarization has not in any way given us any better outcomes. In fact, it gave worse outcomes. When you plot the economic growth of countries during their military era and then during moments of fairly decent democracy periods, you found that growth did better under democratic context than military context, which is also part of why when people sort of say, oh, democracy has failed us, I say, no, it's the practice of democracy that has failed us. You see, because the practice of democracy and democracy as a principle are two different things. So our practice of democracy has been in the breach. If you're practicing democracy, democracy expects that the institutional mechanisms of democracy should be allowed to function. So you need to have an independent judiciary. You need to have a parliament that is accountable to the people and, standing for the collective interests of the people. You can't have a democracy where most of the people in the parliament go to have tea in the house of the president every day, and then they depend on the president to bury their mother for them and do all kinds of things. So they are not holding the president accountable. The basic principles of democracy expect separation of powers. Right? Separation of power and the independence of basically checks and balances, right?
Yeah.
But we don't practice all of this. Then we turn around and say democracy has failed us. You haven't practiced democracy, guys. So to practice democracy, you have to have citizens that understand their power in democracy. You can't say democracy has failed us when half of your citizens who are middle class don't think that caring about how they are governed is important. It was Plato that said that those who think that politics is beneath them will be ruled by their inferiors. Is that not the story?
It
Across
is.
our countries.
Very,
so,
very.
you have these sophisticated Kenyans, they wear their suit, they wear their this thing, and they're speaking perfect Queen's English. But then, who are they bowing to and saying honorable to?
People who've not been to school.
Why? Because they looked away from democracy. So when you haven't practiced democracy properly, don't immediately say it doesn't work. Because in instances where just a little bit of, compliance with the principles, openness of systems in democracy, it has also led to, better governance decisions, which have then led to better growth rates for the continent.
True.
Do you get it?
Yeah.
So I would say that we need to keep observing what's going on in the countries where we have of our continent, where we have had a truncation of democracy. We keep an eye on it and not sort of say be enamored of that. That the fact that democratic rights are important for society means let's not be too quick to embracing the idea of the one-man rule, the charismatic leader. That has its sell-by date.
That's true. This, I will put a very open question, and let's just be sincere with this one, if you don't mind.
Oh, you don't think we've been sincere?
No.
You've been asking me
those ones have been very
questions.
They were very sincere. This one is
you sincere answers. I don't know about your questions.
I'm putting a disclaimer because I know it might cause a lot of comments of people feeling like you left out their leader. But my question is, now you see why I said sincere. Who would you term as your best African leader at the moment, and why? See, now you needed to be sincere. Sitting presidents at the moment.
I have to tell you that that's a very difficult question, because I recently took a look at our countries, and I looked at the performance of our countries on the continent, and I now said to myself, that is why what we're trying to do in fixing politics is the most important thing that Africans must find themselves collectively doing. I do not have an answer. There are people who are promising at this time. We want to keep an eye on what's going on in Namibia. We want to keep an eye on what's going on in Botswana. I recently taught a class at Harvard of ministers, and so the vice president of Botswana is also their Minister of Finance, which was always the model they had during even the time of Festus Mohai, So their ideas, their thoughts are, in these early times, are looking promising. The young president in Senegal is trying to deal with a lot of the backlog of consequences of poor policy choices and governance more broadly. Keeping an eye on our sister in Namibia, who is saying the right things so far, hoping that her cabinet is strong enough so that they can make the really right kinds of decisions. The returned president of Ghana, John Mahama, has made a promise that he will not fail in the way that he failed last time, and that he now has more experience of what not to do. and he made personal promises to me on that, because, when I see our presidents, that's what I mean by being candid.
Yeah.
I just see myself as their citizen, and I just tell them what I see, because I work with data. I work with facts, So when you look at it in that way, I think you can see that maybe there are a little shoots that are coming out in some of these countries that I've talked about. We keep looking at the president in Tanzania and hoping that, maybe when she gets her own legitimacy through by running for office and gaining it, it would improve the kind of influence that she can have. Because when the party sees itself as so powerful, it could restrain some of the things that you would have to do. A president in office is not a joke, and then in party politics, if the analysis that my fixed politics research did was basically showed that the thing is that the political parties have become monopolies. They've become monopolies. It doesn't matter what party. It doesn't matter what acronym they have. Their mindset is the same. It is that we are the ones supposed to enjoy on behalf of the rest of the citizens. So the corruption that happens, the perversion of public decisions that happen in order to give them their private gain over and above the public good, if it's become a culture so that we have a perverse political culture on our continent, if a person who says, I want to reform, I'm a reformer, and I want to make sure that reforms happen, if that person happens to somehow accidentally be getting to office and they are sitting as president, but the structures that they are governing, presiding over, are structures that say, all that your reform you're talking about, you're on your own. That there will not be, it would be hard for them to forcefully push the reforms. Because vested interests can frustrate and pervert policy decisions. You can even make the decisions, but because they are vested interests, they will find ways of making it impossible. There have been presidents who sat in the office thinking that some policy decision that they agreed, policy decisions they agreed are being implemented. And then because they are not paying good attention or not getting feedback from constituents, they assume they've done it. Meanwhile, they just walked away from him. The minister said to the PAM side, don't do it.
In Kenya, they call them the cartels.
Yeah.
Well fixed.
The cabals.
Yeah.
The cartels, the cabals. And they live for their own interest. So so what goes on is that a president could be well-meaning, but the structures around are saying, what are you trying to do? You want to dismantle the beneficial landscape that we have operated in. you will know that, I think it was yesterday we were having a conversation about the political class as well as the bureaucrats. These two are the problems of our continent. So the civil servants are doing their own, and the politicians are doing their own, and they often find their places of convergence, right?
And the citizens are left.
And the citizens are left. And if the citizens continue to sit like, in Nigeria, I think, what do we call them? Mumus. Mumu means a dull lad. Just sitting there, hoping that Jesus Christ will come and fix the thing that they should fix. It will not happen.
True that.
So that is why I go back to where we started from. The Gen Z is saying, we do not accept this. It's the first step. When the Chinese say that, the journey of 1,000 miles requires a step or starts with a step. I normally just sort of add that it starts with the right first step. The Gen Zs being angry at low quality of governance is the necessary first step. The rest of the steps that they now need to take would be done in level-headed mode of being strategic, of having organizational skills, of respecting data, empirical evidence, of being evidence-informed in the choices they are making, of having a certain level of trust of themselves and their instincts. If you want to know whether you can trust somebody, why don't you look at the trajectory of the person? You don't immediately think this person is not good. But on the basis of what did you conclude that? You have to go and find who knows this person. So you can find your leaders of integrity by simply basic checks. What have they done in the past? And you can find your leaders. If you're saying that all of you are bad, then what difference would happen if we now got if we got you into government? You've already told us that all of you are bad. So surely all of you are not bad. So that capacity to be contemplative, to be reflective, to put depth into the thoughts that they are having, would help them to organize even better. So that necessary first right step will lead to the second right step, to the third, to the fourth. And before you know it,
we'll
really have an entirely different culture of engagement of governments.
That's true.
And governance.
I look forward to that day, and I hope the Kenyan Gen Zs, especially since we have been having a lot of complaints, that the words of wisdom given will be taken seriously. Something else that holds Africa somehow is the conflicts that we have seen across in West Africa, Congo, Rwanda, South Sudan. I mean, who are these people that have decided then Africa will not know peace, and for what interests?
Internal and as well as external actors. Internal and external actors. And in the field of economic policy, we've seen that a lot of conflicts come from contests for rent from natural resources. Natural resources often induce a lot of conflict. And you know that whether it's gold or it's copper or it's oil or it's diamond, the benefits are important for those that are local as well as for those that are outside of the continent. So these actors are all over the place. And if you don't have good governance, it is very easy to become a casualty. So that is why, insecurity is tied to quality and effectiveness of governments. When you look at, there is the United States Fund for Peace. It normally does this study of countries in order to determine the resilience, the strength, as well as the fragility of states. So it's called the Fragility Index. It measures a number of things that show how countries are strong, and so you can't worry about whether they will collapse tomorrow. It has indicators around economy, around political, resilience, stability. That's the word I was looking for. Stability. It looks at issues of social cohesion. It looks at, control of your space, the strength of your bureaucracy. It measures a number of indicators. Guess which countries are at the bottom of the ranking? Most of it is Africans. So when you look at the first the topmost fragile state or bordering almost on a failed state, it would likely be an African country. Often it would be anything between Somalia, Sudan, and things like that. Even my country has always been on that ranking as the 13th most fragile, average ranking over years, 13th most fragile state in the world. So when you look at the data and you look at the countries and you put their rankings side by side, their economic performance or their political stability scores or their governance scores, you see that there's either a causal relationship or a correlation. So it means that if we want a secure Africa, we have to have effective governments. We have to have people in governments that are ethical, that are competent, and that are capable. People that are not selling their countries short. Some of the conflicts are actually born out of ego. The leader is egotistical, or, they are born out of their interests. They are born out of, a corruption of the interest of the larger society. We have to untangle or disentangle all the things that are the drivers of conflict. But a most significant driver of conflict is access to minerals because of the economic value of these minerals. I know that the AU, Peace and Security Commission, that is that department that has those issues around peace and stability of the continent.
And there's the IGAD also.
The IGAD, especially in the Horn of Africa. They're trying, but regional mechanisms cannot fix things if internal systems are not credible. That's why we still have to make sure that each of our African countries are running effectively and efficiently. There is no other path to prosperity, stability, and social cohesion than effective governance. I'm screaming this loud all over. I've been doing this for decades. I believe that someday all Africans will hear this scream and they will understand why I am restless. I'm 62. I'm retired. I shouldn't, be bothering myself about a number of these things. But I can't rest. I just can't rest. Each time I see an African country just exemplifying all of the things that are wrong, I feel bad. It diminishes all of us. We can't be a continent that has bright lights, like we're world class, but our country is a mess. It's disgraceful.
Very disgraceful.
It's disgraceful. You can't be individually successful and then have collective shame and failure.
Wow.
I am the first African to be so and so. What is that? Is that What glory do you take in that? You're the first African to be something, something. What did he do for us? We want to be at, what we've seen is that people can come from behind in development and overtake others. Do you know that Singapore's 81,000 GDP per capita is twice that of the UK that colonized it? It is doable, my people. If we as Africans said to ourselves, this is not acceptable. I like when I wake up in the morning and I look at a situation and I say, I can't live with this. It's a moment of decision. And you know what follows that? Action.
I love it. Wow. The figure of Singapore still, I think, will stay in my mind for so long.
Yes, and some people would then say, oh, but Singapore is a very small country. So I say, okay, why isn't Burundi? Why isn't Benin Republic? Why isn't, why are they not the Singapores of our continent? Since it is small that you're using to judge. Why isn't Haiti? It's not about in fact, the bigger you are in terms of population, if you follow the principles of good governance, and you would have more opportunity. That's why population is useful to China. Your internal market alone is of 1-point-something billion people. Look at our continent. It's, cannibalized, or what do you call it, the piecing up of our continent into little.
Yeah, we've just been divided against each other.
So for you to now make it this thing, you have to go through the effort of regional integration with the many multiple layers of barriers that enable you to have a seamlessness. That's why, the East African community is important, because you just want to pool your assets together, right? You want to pool the assets together, assets being your population, because with more population, you can say the East African market offers you a population as against, Kenya offers you a population that is, it's not significant. So boardrooms are looking for size, they're looking for scale. In the case of China and India, these are one country. Is having that population, So you have to combine many countries, in Africa, and then we can say Africa gives you a market of 1.3 billion people. But those 1.3 billion people, before you get to the first 1 million of them, the kind of hurdles you have to fight with. So it means that it is harder for us to be an economic space that is meaningful for scale. People who are thinking of scale will not immediately think of us because they have too many barriers that they have to break through.
Yeah.
So when you look at us as a continent, there is so much work to be done on the table.
And the work has to be done by this generation.
By this generation with the right mindset.
Yeah.
Because look, my father has another quote. He said to us that character is the lasting currency of life. Character. All other currencies can fade. Somebody can get up and say, it's no longer Kenyan shillings. We're now going to do Swahili something, and that currency is gone, right?
Yeah.
But you see, a person of character unto death, it's the lasting currency. When every other person has been forgotten, faded into ignominy, a person of character continues to remain.
True.
So it's a lasting currency. We need that this Gen Z generation understand that at the end of the day, being angry, being an activist is not sufficient. You must be known for character, because character is the thing that mars the leadership process. That is the problem we're solving for. when you talk about corruption and selfishness and, authoritarianism and all kinds of things that are perverse, it is a lack of character that leads to those kinds of behaviors. Wow. So it is important that our Gen Zs should say to themselves, what's my character quotient? Because it's easy to sit from where you are and point fingers and say they are just these kinds of people. All right, so we want to trust you with $1 million. What are you going to be doing at that point in time?
Very good.
So some people will say, I have character, only because the offer that is on the table is 1 million Kenyan shillings. They say, I have character. I refuse to take 1 million Kenyan shillings. So when the offer now comes and they say,
it's 100 million.
We have increased it. We can now give you 100 million Kenyan shillings. He will look to the right, to the left and say, hey, 100
This is what I want.
This is where character ends. So. Character doesn't get up to, so he collects it. What is that? You're gone.
Gone.
You're gone. Character means that, which is why he said that nothing is worth negotiating your values for. So even if it is, you empty all the central banks, the wealth in all the central banks of the world, a person of character stays with their principles. That is, we need more and more of us as Africans who are those kinds of people. Because if it's only a few of us, it will still be problematic.
Yeah.
So when Africans say, oh, it's not the individual, it's institutions, who do you think builds institutions?
People.
And how do institutions emerge? From values. So values-based people build institutions.
Yeah.
When you look at the SPPG mission statement, it talks about building values-based leaders for public leadership, for political leadership. So without values, please don't tell us that you want to lead us. You can't tell. Without values, you say you want to lead us. You're just going to be a younger version of the things that you detest.
You are fighting.
Yeah, you're fighting.
Wow. Dr. Oby. Wow, that is, I've had such a deep, reflective conversation, and I hope our viewers also did. Thank you so much for coming through. By now, everyone should be joining SPPG.
I really look forward to us having a good problem. Because I mean, when we said we wanted to train at scale, we knew that it couldn't be for us to be looking for money so that we can build big complexes where people will have to come to. So we decided technology is our tool.
Yeah.
That's why it's a virtual program, but it has elements of physical, because our students, as part of their training, deliver what we call capstone projects. It forces them to solve problems
in their communities.
That's nice. And then their group work also makes them to engage in theoretical solutions through what we call their discourse. So really, it is a school where we want to train as many as possible. We are in a hurry to get these kinds of people who have character, who are competent, and who are capable.
And for sure you will.
We are doing it.
I love it.
I don't care. We're not even, it's like, try stopping us.
Unless you have a problem. I think Kenyans, again, this is my call to you. If you can, especially the young people, do join SPPG. We are working towards better leadership come 2027, and this right here is the symbol or the sign that you have been looking for. Dr. Oby, thank you so much for sharing with us. It's been such an amazing and fulfilling conversation. I loved every bit of it. And hopefully, once during graduation, yes. I want to believe you will be in Kenya.
I will be here.
And we can have you back.
And I would be, part of the faculty.
Fantastic.
I would teach a couple of the courses, like this evidence-based policy making. This is something that I live by it. In my advice to presidents, it's about after I left the bank, I did work with as an economic advisor to a couple of reform-minded presidents of that era, and it was to help them design their policy, their economic policy strategies, and to help them ensure fruitful execution of them. So that course, for example, is important for me, that all leaders of our continent, whether they are in parliament or they are in the executive function, or even they end up in judiciary, I want it to be that they are evidence-informed decision makers.
I love that. And please, Kenyan leaders, be the first to enroll. You need it the most.
They will learn a lot of
economics. They will learn a lot. Yeah, and I mean, she said she's part of the faculty. So if you enjoyed this episode to this end and you want more of her and a very informed faculty, do register. Thank you for watching.
By the way, one of the persons that will teach in the Kenyan faculty is an honorary faculty member, because our faculty members are honorary faculty members, from around the world and our continent, is Professor Jeffrey Sachs, who was my teacher at Harvard, and then he was my boss. I worked with him afterward, and he's a great guy. He's a world-renowned economist. He's going to teach in the Kenyan program.
Wow. I mean, if you want to meet the rest of the faculty, of course, now you have to join. You can't tell them everyone who's going to be in.
Emma Sky of Yale University will teach, and things like that, So it's one of the faculty that will teach in the Kenyan program is a former minister of finance of Indonesia. That in their era, you should see the kind of economic growth that they registered. There's always a comparison of Nigeria and Indonesia. Our similarities are just almost wow. Population-wise, ethnicity-wise, political history-wise, both colonized, and the military adventurism-wise.
It's an adventure.
So just name it, geography-wise. So, but they have done better than us.
Yeah.
In terms of natural resources-wise, they've done better than us. So so this, their former Minister of Finance is such a great guy.
All right. I love it already.
Great intellectual. So they kind of, in the Nigerian school, our students, when they first come into the program, they come to the first class and they say, "This is my best class." And we just start laughing because we know what's going to happen next. They come to the second class. No, this is my best class. And then they come to the third. So all through the time, we have, in the Nigerian curriculum, it's 144 courses.
Wow.
Across economics, economic policy, political thought, political theory, governance, industry, the trade, sustainability, security, human development, infrastructure, so those important things that people will be making decisions on that are relevant to their specific countries. In the Kenyan curriculum, for example, we have a course on tourism, because tourism is an important sector for Kenyans. So you can't be a leader in Kenya. You're either an MP or an MCA, or you're a governor, you're a president, you're a vice president, and you don't know everything that needs to be known about tourism as a sector and as it relates to Kenya. You should go and look for
start at zero.
Go to another country.
I love that. Dr. Oby, because of time now, because I know you're heading somewhere after this, we have to end it at that. But thank you so much. We appreciate your presence. This has been an overflow of information. And I want to believe everyone that has been watching has time to reflect and, join the school. And hopefully when we are talking next, when we have the class that will be graduating, we will have you again just to review how that has been.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. And it's been really lovely speaking with you.
Fantastic.
I've enjoyed it.
Great to hear that.
Thanks to your great team also.
Yeah, they do a fantastic job all the time. And to you who has been watching us to this end, thank you so much for watching Fanya Mambo Africa. See you on the next episode.